There was a time when an iFunny watermark signaled surface-level normie memes, downstream from other platforms like Reddit or 4chan. But at some point, it went from that to housing one of the strangest online communities, some members of which turned out to be actual criminals. But how did this happen? The iFunny app, created by David Sheff in partnership with a company called FunCorp, was created in 2011 and got its desktop accessible version in 2013, when the iFunny.co website was created. Shortly after this, FunCorp was bought by a Russian company, which led to a bit of an issue. Social media sites like Twitter and Facebook are largely run by English-speaking Westerners, meaning not only are they capable of doing effective content moderation, but they're also subject to the legislation and cultural pressure to crack down on things like hate speech. Russians, on the other hand, don't really share Western sensibilities.
If Donald Trump loses, Elon Musk is fucked. He is fucked, bro. He is gonna be cooked.
If they wanted to do content moderation, they'd either have to hire Russians who are extremely familiar with English, or they'd have to hire people from across the globe, both of which can create overhead and logistical issues. In order to cut down on costs and make back the money they spent to buy it, the Russian company dramatically reduced the resources dedicated to moderating the content, making it a hotbed for edgy jokes, some of which were being posted by genuinely hateful people, and also, in a much more limited capacity, criminals like Samuel Woodward. Sam had a conservative religious upbringing, which on its own made him a pretty unusual person given he was raised in California. Adding to his peculiarity, he was eventually diagnosed with autism and obsessive-compulsive disorder, which, along with his
people who get religious autism are scary. Like, there's autism where you're good at math, good at sports, singer. Like, Kanye has, like, artist autism. It's so autistic, but yeah, he's so amazing at making good works of art. This guy got religion autism, and that shit's scary. It turns you into, like, a fanatic, crazy person.
Lower financial status is speculated to be why Woodward struggled to make friends. His parents noticed that he was being socially ostracized very early on when he was just 10 years old. His differences from the other students was made even more apparent as he began taking part in theater, eventually getting the lead role in a Willy Wonka play. Because of his interest in this, they sent him to the Orange County School of the Arts, which concerned his dad, who was afraid he'd be influenced by the school's culture and end up becoming gay. As we'll come to see, this is a bit of a recurring theme. Even a family friend who used to babysit Sam claimed that this was brought up on multiple occasions in the house, adding that Sam was verbally abused and called homophobic slurs. Regardless of whether this claim is true or not, as he grew up, he began exhibiting these behaviors. As per his high school classmates, he was closed off, awkward, and disagreeable, occasionally expressing his right-wing views, something that certainly didn't make him any more popular in California. His worldview became increasingly extreme as he got older, as he developed a fascination for nationalism and fascism. His father recalled expressing that his devotion to these ideals could potentially put him in prison, something that Sam didn't have any real reaction to. These ideological axioms took a minor step back after high school when Sam enrolled in the Cal State Channel's Islands College. Living in a college dorm and being away from home gave him the opportunity for a fresh start, and his roommate claimed that Sam made an effort to fit in and be sociable, however difficult this was for him to do. His hygiene, now that he was no longer under the scrutiny of his parents, began to decline, which concerned those around him, as other people who simply lived on the same floor as he did claimed they could smell him from their dorms. Whatever successes Sam's attempts at socializing yielded, if any, were clearly not enough to keep him away from his antisocial habits, as he was described as often turning down invitations, voluntarily choosing to stay in his room and play video games. He was a League of Legends player. But playing games wasn't all that he did. He also had an active presence and following on the iFunny platform under the name Saboteur. Very little of his original activity has been archived, but it's clear he became somewhat of a minor celebrity, known in the niche far-right community of iFunny. In one picture, Sam is seen miming the curb stomp from American History X on a friend of his. In another post, which is less reported on, for comprehensible reasons, Sam attaches a picture he took with a Middle Eastern woman, captioning it, "I would vigorously bone the living hell out of my English teacher. Like, holy I don't care if it's miscegenation. That babe would be pregnant as year after year around the clock, acting as a hub of genetic imperialism and giving life to half-Arab saboteur offspring to further my conquests and aims." On the surface, Sam appeared no different than hundreds of other 4chan-derived posters.
Ew.
Well, hello, ladies.
Eventually, this began to change. His attempts to fit in socially were phased out as he nurtured his extreme views.
There are
and he
actually
started looking
men
for
like
groups
that
of
on the
people who shared
internet.
them so we could finally have
That's
a true
so
community.
gross.
His first interest was in Vanguard America, a far-right group founded in 2015 that expressed support for a myriad of different, equally controversial causes, mostly revolving around white nationalism. But he expressed that they weren't hardcore enough for him, as he wanted action and not just talk. So instead, he joined the Atomwaffen Division, an organization described by federal authorities as a racially racially motivated, violent extremist group. It certainly makes justice to that description,
So
since not
terrorists.
only is it much larger than Vanguard in the sheer number of members and countries it's active in, but it's also been directly involved in up to 14 murder cases around the world. His infatuation with them was so great that in 2017, he went as far as to drop out of college to go train with them in Texas, though it's unspecified what this training was for and what it consisted of. During his time there, he apparently struggled to make a living, even sleeping in another member's pickup truck and a homeless shelter at times. But after a while, he began to feel like he'd been duped, that this training camp wasn't all it was cracked up to be. The camaraderie and self-improvement he was hoping would materialize by itself once he got there simply didn't, and he eventually came to the realization that ultimately he was still the same troubled guy, just surrounded by people with extreme right-wing views.
Yeah, bro, even the racists bullied him. What up, Benzo?
Feeling nothing had changed for the better, he decided to head
play
back
some
to
games
California
after
to
this
live with his
video.
parents, who eventually got him a job for a mobile Nerf party business, and were trying to set him on the path to moving past his radical views. Unfortunately, Sam wasn't as enthused as they were about returning to normalcy. You see, for an uncertain amount of time, Sam engaged in another unsavory online activity besides his iFunny stuff, which he'd largely moved away from at this point. Sam would frequently get on dating apps, lure in gay men, entice them, even sending them pictures, and then ghost them, supposedly because of how much he hated them. Something tells me that this is just a cover story for his attraction to getting gay guys to edge, but whatever.
Wow.
He did this multiple times over the course of 2017 until he happened upon one Blaze Bernstein, someone he'd gone to school with who happened to not only be gay, but also Jewish. Blaze, instantly recognizing who he'd matched with, was shocked to see someone who was known for being a conservative on a dating app looking for men. He told Sam he was the last person he expected to see on Tinder, prompting him to initially deny that he was looking for men in the sexual sense, claiming he was searching for a hunting partner instead. But this excuse disintegrated.
Yeah, imagine being on, like, what, does Tinder have like a gay tab? And you're like, I'm not looking for a boyfriend, just a hunting partner. Nothing gay, I promise. Just come in the woods with me. Let's go alone in the woods where no one can see us.
Complimented him on his looks, which Sam responded to by complimenting him back. Sam tried to set it up so that they'd see each other that very night, but once Blaze said he couldn't make it, he backed off, saying he'd been lying and was just curious since he'd never been hit on by a gay guy before. Despite promising to keep their conversation a secret, Blaze was telling a couple of his friends about it, who were equally as shocked that Sam matched with him.
Top looking for hunting.
I need to get by Sam Woodward.
Yo, the Blaze guy's gonna be the rabbit. He's gonna be the hunter. It's usually how I do it.
Nothing came of this set of interactions, as after they failed to set something up for that night, their communications went cold, and they lost contact. 6 months passed, and nothing unusual happened until January 2018, when Sam once again reached out to Blaze over Tinder. Their second bout of conversation was initiated by Sam wanting to explain himself, saying he unmasked himself and claiming he figured himself out, obviously suggesting he'd come out of the closet in one way or another. Initially, Blaze didn't respond well to this, but continued to exchange messages with him. This came to a head when, during their chat, Sam said that despite being straight, he might make an exception for Blaze. Again, Blaze expressed skepticism, suggesting that this was just another prank and that he wouldn't fall for it. But Sam went a step further from last time and gave him his Snapchat info, where they went on to set up a time and place for them to meet. This wasn't another elaborate ghosting scheme, as when Blaze arrived where they were supposed to meet, Sam was there, and after he got in his car, the two drove to a nearby park. Mind you, it was almost midnight, and they were going to a park where there was nothing to do, so you can sort of extrapolate what their plans were. Right around 11:30 p.m., Blaze sent one last text to a friend of his saying, "I did something really horrible for the story, but no one can ever know." He eventually got a reply from
he was a true gay. He was doing it for the plot. He was doing it for the story. He said earlier, he goes, if I could bang Sam Woodward, it's because he was like a conservative, closeted guy back in high school and no one would ever expect it. I really did something for the story. Bro was just in it for the plot, just to prove that like all these closeted homophobic guys are actually just gay and like hiding it.
From his friend, asking what this supposedly horrible thing was. They never got a reply. Going off of both Sam's own retelling of how it went down and what was eventually found by forensics, what happened next was that after taking his sleeping bags, snacks, and some drug paraphernalia with them into the park, the two began talking about their high school experiences and commiserating about college, and then they proceeded to smoke together. As Sam relaxed and zoned out, he felt Blaze move closer to him and presumed he was just going to get something off of the snack bag. But then he felt something warm on his leg, and when he opened his eyes, he saw Blaze unbuckling his belt, holding a phone in his other hand. Immediately, at least according to Sam Sam's recollection, Blaze began saying, "Calm down, it's not a big deal. It's already done. I got you, you fucking hypocrite," and saying something along the lines of, "You're outed." Sam began babbling incoherently, claiming he felt nothing but terror, in fear that Blaze was recording or taking pictures of him in his vulnerable state to expose him. What wasn't immediately retold by Sam, but what was eventually revealed in an affidavit, was that Blaze had kissed him, allegedly causing him to clench his jaw and fists as he wanted to push him off. Eventually, Sam erupted in a violent attack against Blaze, stabbing him upward of 24 times with a knife his father had gifted him, and proceeding to bury his body in a shallow grave near the park. By January 3rd, Blaze was reported missing by his parents, and a massive search for him started. Sam was quickly ascertained as the last person who saw him prior to him going missing, and Blaze's parents called him up and recorded it. During the call, he said he thought that Blaze was pulling a prank on him, as he lied and said Blaze left his car at some point to meet another person at the park and never returned. Sam was already being surveilled and tracked by the police since he was the primary suspect. The police weren't the only people suspicious of him either, as a few Reddit posts were made by people who claimed to know him in real life, one of which read, "I've interacted with Sam Woodward a lot in middle school and rarely in 9th to 10th grade. He stopped attending OCSA after sophomore year. After leaving OCSA, he contacted a well-known homosexual classmate in the hope of finding answers on how to deal with his own homosexuality. What started as a crutch for support grew into a passionate fling, going so far as to send his own pictures. I can't recall the outcome of it to a T, but I do know it ended without backlash. Obviously, Sam didn't know this person had shown fellow classmates the DMs, or I'm sure there would have been. Sam could easily have transferred his self-prejudice to Blaze and killed the part of himself he was ashamed of." In the comments, other people echoed this same sentiment, and unsurprisingly, within a day of Blaze's body being found and identified, Sam was arrested and charged with homicide. As they searched his house and car, they found the murder weapon with Blaze's DNA on it and bloodstains on both the sleeping bag and Sam's car. He faced 26 years to life and had his bail set to $5 million. As he pled not guilty, many publications began investigating his past, considering the possibility that this was a hate crime due to Sam's extremist views. It was during this investigation that they found out about his connection to the Atomwaffen division, as well as Sam's history of online activity pertaining to his radical
and the crazy thing is, he's trying to like prove off like, "Oh, I'm this super testosterone neo-Nazi conservative. I don't like, I hate immigrants. I hate gay people. It's gross. It's not American. It's not right." And it's like, but the whole time he was secretly into dudes. And so it's like, it makes you think all these other dudes who act like this on Twitter, Instagram, online it's the same thing, bro. They're all just like so closeted that like, and they're so jealous that like other people can be like brave and be free and come out of the closet, and they never can do it for themselves, and they like act out in such an insane, terrible way. It's so scary, I bet.
Beliefs. His Snapchat and other private social media accounts were uncovered, along with pictures of him he'd never posted anywhere else. Most importantly, it was claimed that after leaving, or possibly having been kicked out of Atomwaffen for saying they were posers, Sam joined up with another group called Iron March, which has since become defunct. Despite his decommissioning from Atomwaffen, after news of the murder came out, many members of the group came out in support of him, referring to him as Arn, the same handle he used in the division's chat, which he apparently was still active in. They weighed in on the situation in support of Sam's actions, which certainly didn't bode well for him as far as avoiding being branded as a hate figure. As of August 2018, he was charged with a hate crime, and the defense's attempts to paint him as someone who struggled with his own sexuality, as well as being on the autism spectrum disorder, weren't taking. He was found competent to stand trial, and was ultimately sentenced to life without parole in July 2024. Despite the seriousness of the situation and the gravity of his crime, his activity on iFunny was never forgotten, and he's since become a running joke for posters, who either joke about the incident himself and claim Sam was innocent and that the stabbing was an accident, or suggest that Sam will be miraculously released so that he can finish his rates. Rates on iFunny meaning when someone popular reviews your account and gives it a rating. While the memes are definitely funny, given that he got life in prison, I highly doubt that will be happening anytime soon. Though he was a much lighter offender than Samuel Woodward, an 18-year-old Ohio native, because he just had to be from Ohio,
of course
named
he's
Justin
from
Olsen,
Ohio,
joined the ranks of people whose online activity ultimately got them in more legal trouble than they expected. Unlike Sam's iFunny profile, which I found no archives of from prior to his crimes, there is a snapshot of Justin's account precisely on the day he was arrested. He posted under the alias Army of Christ, and though very few posts are visible in the archive, they have been saved elsewhere. Based on their nature, he was very clearly an extremely right-wing person, as he frequently suggested he'd commit acts of violence, sometimes naming his potential targets such as Planned Parenthood. He had over 5,000 followers and 200 posts, all of which express varying degrees of radical political beliefs. One of his last posts was the announcement of the creation of a Discord server for people who liked his posts to join, so that they could discuss their topics of interest. The thing is, the FBI had already been paying attention to his online presence since February of 2019, and presumably they had one of their agents join the group chat to see what kinds of things were being said there. Unsurprisingly, they found a lot of alarming stuff. For example, Justin wrote an entire paragraph about the Waco massacre, when a compound owned by David Koresh and populated by Branch Davidians, some kind of weird Christian denomination, were stockpiling weapons and got raided by the ATF, resulting in the deaths of many, including women and children. He saw this as justification for what could be considered acts of domestic terrorism,
but that
saying,
curtain
hell,
is
even
not
the
coming
Oklahoma
down.
City bombing shows that armed resistance is a viable method of political change. There is no legal solution. Don't comply with gun laws. Stock up on stuff they could ban. In fact, go out of your way to break these laws. They're f***ing stupid. I just turned 18. I'm in the process of building an AR-15 right now. I'm moving to Austin for college, but I'm building a gun to keep in a lockbox down there in case it hits the fan while I'm away at college. I can't keep guns on campus, unfortunately. He finishes by saying, in conclusion, shoot every federal agent on site. Not the smartest thing to say when your Discord server is public for anyone to join, to say the least. These posts were particularly alarming to the agents seeing them, since this was just a few days after mass shootings took place in El Paso and Dayton. So everyone was on high alert about that sort of thing. With the significant increase in pressure for intelligence agencies to catch potential domestic terrorists before they carry out their crimes, the FBI office in Anchorage that was monitoring his online activity flagged it and then notified local law enforcement. Justin didn't exactly make it hard for them to do so, since the very messages he sent on the Discord server revealed where he was from, among other things that made it very easy to locate him. They'd already linked the account to him in July, and within one day of these messages being sent in early August, the FBI raided his father's home where he was living and seized 15 rifles, 10 semi-automatic pistols, and around 10,000 rounds of ammunition. They also found a large machete, which was not seized. When questioned about the things he'd said in support of domestic terror attacks, he claimed that they were only jokes, but I doubt this is very compelling, as he was given no bond and got charged with threatening federal agents and interstate threats, which could get him up to 15 years in prison if he's convicted. Even if he gets a really good lawyer and gets time served and probation or something mild to that effect, it's a safe bet that he lost the ROTC scholarship he was bragging about on his Discord server earlier that year. Despite what an example this seemingly should set for the kind of thing you don't want to be doing online if you don't want to be arrested, some people didn't take what happened to Justin as a lesson. Another iFunny user named Awarded made a series of posts beginning the same day as Justin was hit with the federal criminal charges. They read as follows: I am done with my state and their bullshit abortion laws and allowing innocent kids to be slaughtered for the so-called women's rights bull. I've seen nothing but go out of their way to get an abortion, but no more. I will not tolerate this anymore. I'm done. On August 23rd, 2019, I will go to an abortion clinic in Chicago. I will proceed to slaughter any doctor, patient, or visitor I see in the area, and I will not back down. Consider this a warning for anyone listening. To the FBI agents on this app, I am not a satirical account. I post what I mean, and I will carry out what I post. They arrested Army of Christ for no reason except suppressing us and our freedoms. I will do the same thing to these who think it's a freedom to murder an innocent life. Come after me, you degenerate government puppets. Stop me if you can. We pride the so-called federal agents by saying they are doing their job. They're helping lower crime, and they're keeping us safe. But is that really so? These buffoons arrest us because we practice our freedoms of rights. This world and society is going downhill. I do not care anymore. May God forgive me for what I'm going to do soon. What can I say? He chud it out. He went full chud. You never go full chud. Also, if you target the patients, aren't you taking out the babies along with them? Kind of defeats the purpose here, but I doubt that he was really able to reason this out with his serious chud maxing haze. Much like what happened to Justin, the FBI got to work on figuring out who Awarded was. First, they went to the Twitter accounts he'd announced the existence of on his iFunny page, where one of them was called I Just Want a Hoe, which is very relatable to be honest. They also figured out his birthday and correlated his Instagram and Facebook accounts, which they knew were from the same guy because they all had soccer stuff, which was pretty much all he talked about besides committing acts of terrorism. While most of the accounts are now gone, his Instagram still stands,
soccer and terrorism.
And we can find a number of Twitter interactions with one of his accounts, though the account itself has been suspended. The thing about these other sites, though, as I said in the beginning, is that they're Western sites, meaning they will trip over themselves to cooperate with the police when it comes to hate speech related things. They immediately obtained his entire docs from Twitter, including his IP, his house address, and his full name. 3 days after the iFunny posts were made, FBI agents showed up at his house, and when they questioned him about his posts, he said they were simply a joke. While it's a very cheap cop-out, the fact that they found no firearms or weapons of any kind in his house indicates he never had the means to carry out the threats that he made in the first place. Regardless, he got a federal criminal charge for transmitting a threat in interstate commerce, which could have him sentenced to 5 years in prison. Like the other court cases I talked about so far, it took years for this case to get settled, as the threats were in 2019, but he was only convicted in November of 2023. This story is pretty
Picks
unique
up
in that the
the
involvement
FBI
of
agents
iFunny with the
chasing
perp
you.
only becomes clear after his crime. To be fair, this
This
story
is
is
North
unique in a lot of ways.
Carolina.
On the 28th of May 2020, a bank teller in Kannapolis, North Carolina, called the police and informed them of a large white Ford van that had been there for a while. Upon first glance, it could be just an abandoned van that was violating parking regulations or something minor like that, but then again, there was the off chance that the van was there for darker reasons. So when the police showed up, they decided not only to tow it, but also to search it, despite not having a warrant. Legally, this can be risky, because they'd later have to prove they had a good reason, but due to their findings, this wasn't a difficult task. In the van, they found a box for a Taurus handgun, a canister of tannerite, which is an explosive by the way, a box of ammo, $509,000, books related to bomb-making, improvised weapons, and Islam, along with drawings of swastikas and planes crashing into buildings. And last but not least, a total of 5 firearms, 4 rifles, a handgun, and an incomplete 6 firearm in the form of a lower receiver. Whoever this was, he wasn't just packing, he had an entire loadout in the back of his van. It's hard to say what's the craziest thing in that bunch, but I think having over $500,000 in cash in the back of a van probably takes the cake, though it becomes a lot less bizarre when they speculated it might be inheritance money and not stolen. Still insane regardless. Later that day, a man named Alexander Hillel Treisman showed up at the bank, having no idea they just towed his bug-out van. As he started asking around about what happened to it, the police were alerted and promptly arrested him. They searched the car he drove in with, a green Honda Accord, and found yet another pair of firearms. They also searched his wallet and found that he had multiple different forms of identification from multiple different states. When they asked him about this, he said it was so that he could buy firearms from several different states, and openly admitted to his interest in terrorist incidents and mass shootings. In the face of this de facto confession to having committed at least a couple of federal crimes, the police decided to ring up the FBI and bring them in on the investigation to better understand the scope of potential crimes. Due to the explosive material that was found in his van and his violent
I like how he was just carrying his inheritance around in cash in the back of a van.
Looped in. But just when you thought there were already more than enough things incriminating this guy, they decided to look through his devices. Across 8 devices, 3 laptops, 3 hard drives, a cell phone, and a flash drive, Alex had amassed 1,248 videos and 6,721 photos of CP. Based on his browsing history and the dates on the files on his laptop, they discovered that he'd recently come from South Carolina, and during this trip, he stayed at a hotel where he downloaded this illegal material. They also found out he had accounts on multiple different social media platforms. He had a Steam account called Dog but with a fat dick, in which he was a part of a group called Christ Loving Cannibals. He also had a YouTube account called
Steam group. I didn't even know these were a thing. There's people on Steam.
Flippy Mapper, which has since been removed, but left behind a digital footprint consisting mostly of Sub Rosa videos. However, there was one person who, almost a year and a half prior to Alex's arrest, had recorded him on a Discord call under the name Arthur Swastika, trying to get the other people on this call to access a Pakistani website that contained illegal content.
No, I mean, like, this is some stuff that would, like, get banned from, like, any other site on the internet. It has to be hosted from Pakistan. They're all, like, 11-year-old girls in my basement, you know?
Through these, they found out that another one of his virtual aliases was Alex the Bodacious, and that he had an account on Reddit because, of course, this guy was on Reddit. Surprisingly, while the account is dead and buried, there are archives of it on the Wayback Machine, and his posts are quite interesting. One of them reads, "I'm your standard NEET. These days I sit at home all day after dropping out of high school. 2 years after I did, I realized it was a mistake. Now, I'm just looking for ways to entertain or just plain stimulate my brain. I've found myself calculating out how many resources I'll have in a video game with algebra, and role-playing as an accountant or a driving instructor, and liking the reliable Zen feel. I don't have anything to do, and I'm not depressed, but I live alone, go outside rarely, talk even more rarely, but really, I just wish I could talk to people without feeling outcasted constantly." In a reply to another thread, he expressed he identified with the feeling of needing to cry, but not being able to. However, this was just a fraction of his activity on Reddit. There was plenty of random stuff related to his Sub Rosa gameplays and some other odd things, like his belief that the government invented HIV to target the gay community, and that one of his greatest fears in relation to women is if she didn't wipe properly. It's only in 2019 that his activity makes a turn for the worse, as Alex can be seen responding to threads relating to the sexualization of minors and school shootings, as well as some jokes referencing kidnapping women and transforming animals into black people. Even still, there was nothing outright criminal, just weird. But the same cannot be said for his activity in 2020. A thread he created on a Sub Rosa related subreddit reads, "How do I dox in Sub Rosa? I keep dying and being called a PDF file, and I want to kill people in real life about it. How can I find the addresses of those I hate and execute them for their crimes?" Some people replied, and it seems they thought he was joking, though it's quite likely he was completely
What's
serious.
PP
In the available
it makes
archives, there's no
sense.
trace of the post I'm about to cover, but law enforcement claim that their thorough sleuthing of his online activity turned up a myriad of posts containing threats of mass shootings,
This guy
executing
was
people he disliked.
internet
And keep the word
scum.
execute in mind because it will come back
Doxing,
later,
trying to
as well as several
execute
posts referencing illegal
CP,
material and
guns,
CSA.
bombs.
According to Alex, his family stopped talking to him because of his obsession with shootings and terror attacks, which brings to question the
Guy
narrative
is
that the
just
money he had in the
fucking
van was
evil.
inheritance money. As they went through his phone, they found a video of Alex talking about how awesome it would be to hijack an airplane and fly it into a building. Apparently, he'd also considered doing a mass shooting at the food court of a mall, either on Christmas or Black Friday, when it'd presumably be packed with people. They discovered this plan in one of his notes from October 2019, which they
crazy
began
stuff.
correlating with his search history. Eventually,
now
they figured
terrorist
out that
attack
as
plans.
of the 16th of May, literally within 2 weeks of him being arrested, he'd been looking for Joe Biden's home address. This is when he wasn't the president yet, by the way. And he was also looking up, does the VP get Secret Service for life on Google? Ever since March of that year, he'd been searching
was
for
coming
gun laws
after
in Joe
Joe.
Biden's state, rifle parts, and night vision goggles. There was also evidence he traveled to a Wendy's near Biden's home after he bought one of his rifles in New Hampshire. Right around the same time, they found a single note which simply read, execute. Lastly, they discovered that he hadn't been private about his plans either, as Alex also had an iFunny account, which unfortunately we have no archives of, where he apparently posted a literal rage comic with a thinking derp positing the question, should I kill Joe Biden? The first thing he was charged with was the CP, but it seemed every second a new charge was added. While he was being held and waiting for trial, they found out that he was the son of Eric Treisman, a famous Jewish activist and lawyer who campaigned on behalf of Tibetan and Native American rights and was responsible for getting former President George Bush to meet with the Dalai Lama. Eric died in 2009, days after finalizing divorce proceedings with Alexander's mother. As it turned out, Alex had a brother and a half-brother, the latter being a professor of mathematics in British Columbia. According to Alexander's defense and statements from his mother, he had Asperger's syndrome or high-functioning autism, which they tried to argue should get him placed in a minimum security facility, but thankfully the court deemed this unreasonable. His mom was also caught telling him he should jump bail, which I don't think was even a possibility since there was no mention of him being allowed bail. She told him this over a jail call, which is obviously recorded, so I guess the apple didn't fall too far from the tree there. They eventually searched his cell and found out that he'd drawn a stick figure drawing where one stick man labeled me was beating another stick man with a bat, the other one being labeled whoever calls the cops on a parked car. They also found a handwritten autobiography which contained references to shootings, but unfortunately its contents were never released. While the end result of his trial is yet to become public, they found evidence that Alex had photoshopped his face onto a Polish passport and had thoroughly looked into immigrating to Canada, having even rented a place and paid a light bill in the country, meaning they probably caught him right before he was able to commit whatever major crime he was planning, and then abscond to the cold north. Regardless of whatever happens in the trial, which seems to still be ongoing,
like,
the
we're not
chances he'll
giving
ever
you
see
him.
the outside of a prison cell
You can't.
are
This is a
virtually
different
zero.
country. He
A
made it
resident of
across the line.
Holland,
They would
the
give
city
him.
in Michigan,
You
not
don't
the
want a
country,
mass
thought he'd
shooter
not
in
only
Canada?
succeed where Treisman failed, but
That's a
also outdo him
scumbag.
by targeting Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and the Governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. His name was Joshua Doctor, though his name is misspelled in the court document of his charges, and unfortunately, we don't know his username on iFunny. What we do know is that in January 2021, he made multiple threatening comments, all of which contained threats of shooting and killing elected officials in order to create a catalyst for a new American revolution. While he made these posts, he was also collecting information on his phone on how to make an explosive. At least, they found that information on his phone, but it's uncertain whether he was planning to act on it. His posts were probably taken more seriously than they would be if it happened at any other time.
It's kind of crazy. I bet this happens all the time. We just don't hear about it. Like people looking up, Googling this kind of crazy stuff. What up, Emily? Mass shooting, terroristic fight, bombings, whatever. And let the cops catch them. We just don't hear about it. Probably happens a lot. I'm pretty sure too, Veneer. Like
prior to his threats, another group of people had allegedly planned to kidnap Governor Whitmer. With all of this coming fresh off the heels of the January 6th incident in the Capitol, you can see how law enforcement agencies were on high alert. But unlike many of his iFunny criminal cohorts, Joshua wasn't dysfunctional by any means. His parents were still married, his dad was the chairman of a philanthropic organization in their community, and he had 2 siblings, neither of whom committed similar acts to him. Joshua himself was actively attending college and working for his school's landscaping department while studying to become a police officer. Usually, people who are that busy struggle to find time to sit around on the computer and think up heinous stuff to post online. So Joshua's case is pretty unusual in that regard. Despite having made the comments all the way back in January, it took a few months for it to turn into actual charges. First, someone tipped the FBI off on it, who then sent the information to the Michigan State Police, who then turned the case over to the Attorney General. It was only on March 15th that his information turned into actual charges. 2 felonies. One is using a computer to commit a crime, and the other is a false report or threat of terrorism, each attached to a 20-year sentence and or a $20,000 fine.
Damn.
Somehow, despite the court document calling for his arrest, he somehow found out he was being charged with those felonies and promptly turned himself in literally within a day of the document being emitted. As he was arraigned and his court dates began being scheduled, his parents gave a statement about how shocked they were over the charges. Most likely, they had no idea what he was posting to iFunny. At this point, there were already so many cases revolving around iFunny that the site decided to comment on the situation, with Chief Information Officer Dennis Litvinov saying, "Such content is a violation of our community guidelines and is immediately removed from our platform. We are currently working on finalizing the comment section pre-moderation systems launch within the next few weeks. We will continue removing comments based on our trigger words list as part of the moderation team. We're actively searching for and removing content that incites, praises, or encourages violence or harm, and will take additional measures if necessary." This was a sign for these posters that the fun was about to end, and it's also the grounds for what would eventually come to be referred to as the Banocost, a purge of all of the riskier content and a crackdown on the politically radical accounts to prevent more situations like these from evolving into a greater issue against iFunny's moderation policy. A few months after he turned himself in, Josh pled guilty to the felony of making a terrorist threat, and the prosecutor agreed to drop the other charge. However, the 20-year sentence from the remaining felony could potentially be evaded entirely, since the state offered something called the Holmes Youthful Trainee Act, which allows young offenders from 18 to 26 to avoid having a criminal conviction go on their record. This basically amounted to a kind of probation where Josh would have to undergo counseling, and once completed, the case would get dismissed. Out of all of the potential iFunny criminals, Joshua Doctor definitely got away the lightest. But so far, we've exclusively covered people whose accounts are completely gone and who have been covered in the news for the crimes they were charged with. But Derek, known on iFunny as Skunt Punch, is a very different story. He began as a small timer. His only crime was a bit of content thievery. He regularly stole memes, or not even memes, just images, and removed people's watermarks, crudely replacing them with his own. While his popularity never exceeded the confines of iFunny, he became pretty well known there, though he was more infamous than he was famous. Based on the comments alone, many of which I can't even read out loud without getting demonetized, we can see that the small portion of the iFunny community that cared enough to interact with him all had exclusively negative opinions of him. Partly, it was because the images were all stolen and he tried to pass them off as if they were his, but it was also due to the sheer cringeworthy nature of his posts. It's not like he was stealing popular current memes or something. He was posting straight up Facebook slop from a decade ago. It's hard to understand why he even thought it was worth it to steal them. Do you really crave credit for gems such as "I want to count the wrinkles on your stink star"? Because the timeline of his online activity isn't obvious and his account has had many posts deleted, it's hard to figure out the when and why for certain events surrounding his story. This makes it especially difficult to determine the legitimacy of the allegations that Derek has, on many different occasions, made statements that suggested he was a pedo and zoophile. One of the pieces of supposed evidence for this is that he has a series called Skunt Facts, where he makes a post that has basically no joke and is just a gratuitous display of one of his opinions. Many entries to this series are no longer up, but supposedly number 8 read, "Skunt Facts number 8. If she's hot and you're still dating by the time she turns 18, it should be allowed." This, along with other screenshots where he either directly identifies as a MAP, minor attracted person, or simply uses their flag, could easily be faked, but still, the people in the iFunny community pretty confidently attest to their veracity. There were also alleged instances of him posting images of naked children or featuring them prominently in videos. In a comment, he supposedly declared his intention to kill a dog, specifically that it would arouse him. Either these are a testament to his true character, or a display of just how deeply his detractors hate him for his obnoxious online personality, to the point where they're falsely depicting him as a creep. Either way, what is a matter of fact is that he made the mistake of showing his face, and people quickly figured out what his handles were on the accounts he had on other social media platforms. One where he showed more of his personal life. With all of that, they had an easy time doxing his location as well, which the community shared in its own very unique way. You might be wondering, what did people do with this information? Well, they sent him pineapples. This isn't a euphemism or code for anything. They actually sent him pineapples. Some of them actually walked up to his doorstep and left a juicy one there. Others DoorDashed them, and somebody even created a GoFundMe campaign to send him a full pallet of pineapples. Apparently, this whole pineapple thing came from a random 4chan green text in which a guy claimed to have terrorized a bully of his by learning every place he went to and conspicuously leaving pineapples in the locations to drive him insane. They went above and beyond the Call of Duty and proceeded to mark his home in Google Maps as a soup kitchen and pineapple farm, as well as a public bathroom and homeless shelters. They also gave reviews of his place, reading, "Disgusting slime coming down from the walls. Toilet is also used as his lunch tray, so there are rats everywhere, and they bite your toes and balls. It was an okay bathroom, but I just wish Mr. Skunt Punch didn't sit there and watch. He also insisted on wiping for me, which was weird. Weird little boy pics everywhere. Walked in when he was licking toilet seats. Another bad thing, the fresh smell of meth coming from the dungeon. His words, not mine. He often tried to play it off as if all this trolling wasn't making him mad, even threatening to dox people who DoorDashed him and claiming he'd moved houses, daring people to dox him again. However, he let the mask slip at least once, as he recorded a video showing the state of his knuckles after he punched his door due to how mad he got from being bombarded with emails and phone calls and pineapples.
Yeah, I might have punched that board a little bit too hard.
Damn,
I don't think your knuckles supposed to look like that, but
that's crazy, chat. Skunt punch. Well,